Welcome in, everyone. Tonight's video, we're going to be recapping. This was a public idea on Apple, so we're going to kind of touch on the flow, how I use the flow to kind of come up with the idea. We're going to touch on the entry, touch on the trade idea, touch on the movement of the stock from the entry and all that, touch on the contract, and touch on why I scratched, because I ended up scratching and only wanted one entry. So I'm going to try to keep it short and as much detail as possible here. So let's start out with the flow here. So this was yesterday, obviously. You can come back here, you can see I always do a flow analysis here. So flow for Apple, obviously you can see pretty bullish flow here. We had very short 2.9 calls on the 190, a flow alert on the 3.8 190s, some more 190s here for 3.8, and some 170s here for 2.16. So kind of overall flow here was bullish there. So now coming back to the trade idea. So the trade idea was Apple 187.5 calls less than 187.44. I'll always kind of put in a little note here as well what's going on in the day. So let's jump over to the chart here. So as you can see, 187.44. This was a very easy trade. So you had obviously had a very far drop. So I'm going to also touch on kind of theta and stuff with the contracts, which this is a very good example for that too as well. So here's our entry. Obviously 187.44 was the entry, and I always like to put two alerts here. I kind of like to put an alert maybe 10-15 cents, just depending on how much the stock moves, so I can kind of get ready, queue up my contracts over here, all that. And so, and I'm Central Time for those who don't know, so this triggered at 9:33. So here we are, 9:33. Got a quick small drop below. Not a big deal. No way you would have stopped out on this. Then we had a nice climb back up, and I actually ended up sizing out in here a little bit, and I'll kind of tell everybody why. And I said no re-entries, but kind of just looking at the overall movement of the stock here. There's your entry. We came up some more. Obviously peaked here, almost $1.30 move there, and kind of came back down and chopped throughout the day. So this is a very easy trade, especially earlier in the week, and I'll kind of touch on that a little bit. Why it's easier during the beginning of the week as well too. But yeah, this is an easy trade to size out of. I mean, you have a lot of time. It's not a rushed, quick 2-minute trade where you're kind of forced to get out quick. So now let's look at the contract. So again, we triggered at 9:33, and it was the 187.5 calls. So again, I mean, this was pretty much at the low of the day. I filled at 90 on here. Could have got a little better fill at 86. Not a big deal. But 90, you're not going to stop out there, especially if you're doing 10% stops. But you can see, so again, this is kind of where I sized out in here. I had my stop set at 105 once we got up to 113 there. So 90 to 130 or 105. So I secured about 15%. But again, I'm putting out notes as the trade ideas go on. So I'm kind of being a little more, I'd say, cautious. So just because I'm trying to put notes out for everybody else. But obviously you can see if you would have held, we came all the way up to 157. So 90 to 157, that's about 75% or so. If you would have held to the peak, and you're not going to hold to the peak, I mean, there's no way you're going to be, you more than likely would have been out here at 95 if you held that long. So again, here's the movement. There's your entry. So 90 for me, all the way up to 157. And looking at Apple, let me come back here to Apple. From our entry to the peak, so it's not a huge move percent wise, but you get about $1.30 there. And when you look at contracts, and this is why picking the correct contract is important. So we had the 187.5s, and we triggered it. Let me go back here one more time. We triggered it 187.35. We had the 187.5s. This is why it's very, very important to pick the correct contract. You have a very high delta. So getting that dollar move, you're getting about 60 cents per contract. That's huge. And obviously the delta changes as time goes on. Stock goes up, goes down, delta will change. So, but that's why picking the correct contract is very key. So now I want to touch on the theta on why this so I'm going to touch on the contract here first. Actually, I lied. I'm going to go back to the stock. So you can see, so we're going to go from 1045 to about the end of the day. We stayed pretty flat up here. So remember this 1040, 1045 to the end of the day. Look at the contract here. So 1040, 1045. This is theta. This is later in the week. And if you swung these and Apple didn't move at all from this position, you're losing 54 cents on the contract. So these are going to open up about 60, 70 in the morning. So you're taking a big hit on that. So this is why trading in the week and swinging weeklies this late in the week can be dangerous if you don't know what you're doing, all that. So, but you can see the Apple stock stayed pretty flat throughout the day till close. Look at the contract depreciating in value throughout the day while the stock was staying flat. Now, if this was a Monday or Tuesday, you're probably going to stay pretty close to this 135 range. But with theta this far in the week and sideways movement, that's going to eat your contract up. So another thing to touch on is I said I wasn't looking for another reentry. We obviously didn't trigger again anyways, but my reason why, let me pull this up. 10-year yield. So we triggered it. It was 930. Where are we here? So could see a spike in the 10-year. So I'm not going to dive super deep into yields, but as the 10-year goes up, it's going to put downward pressure on the market. So I noticed that as we were trading, and I'm like, okay, we're not going to risk it again as the yields are going up. Obviously, we finished down a little bit on the day, but kind of a reason why I scratched that there as well. But that's kind of all I got for this trade. I mean, very simple, easy trade to understand, especially for beginners. When I'm saying 187.44 or less than 187.44, you're just kind of looking for that bounce. But I do want to touch on one more thing before we finish, kind of how I found that entry. So typically what I like to do for entries, I start out further time frames. So 4 hour, obviously you can see we had good support there. We bounced. That was today. Good support there. Good support in this area. Support there. Support there. And then I like to fine tune my entries. Obviously, I'll get down to the 1 minute. So 30-minute good support there. Support there. Support there. Failed the support there, but support, support, support there, support there. Coming down to the 5 minute, and this is when I start to really adjust my entries. So this wasn't here today, obviously, but this was yesterday. So I'm always looking for that 2-to-1 risk reward ratio too. So coming down here, okay, we got a double bottom there. That's nice. Had good support there. Consolidation with a push up there. We had some issues there. And coming back here, obviously support there. And then kind of just fine tune into the 1 minute. Come here, obviously we bounced there, had a bounce there, bounce there, little bounce there. So even if you have that little bounce there, it gives you time to adjust stops up and get some profits. And obviously had a spike there. Come back here. Good bounce there, good bounce there. We had some bounce there, little bounce there. Obviously we're not touching the entry there, but this kind of all goes into the long-term idea. And again, with looking at the how I want my entries to move with the 2-to-1, I'm looking for a better entry, a discounted entry. So, but yeah, that's pretty much kind of how I found that entry. It takes a little bit to kind of figure them. there's more than just kind of looking at the lines on the chart. Obviously, I'm looking at the contracts, their date to expirations on the flow and all that. So, but otherwise, that's kind of all I got tonight. Quick little video for everybody. Hope everybody has a great night.